I'm Adrienne White, and today I'm going to provide you with a few insights into neuroscience and a model to help you improve your interactions and collaboration with other people and ultimately improve performance. There have been so many amazing discoveries in neuroscience over the past few years, and even though we're only scratching the surface of what there is to be known about the brain, we do know, or what we do know, can truly impact performance, the level of trust in the workplace and relationships. So the question is, how can we improve performance? Well, we already use a variety of tools, systems, techniques, but often improving performance on many levels is impacted by just how we approach people and situations. So wouldn't it be nice if we had a key to understand it? Well, we do. As it controls the rest of our body, let's talk about the brain. So what is the primary purpose of the brain? Survival, to keep us alive. So it's no surprise that the primary organizing principle of our brain is to avoid threats and to move toward reward. So over the years, different researchers have used different words. Some say it's about fear or love. Some say it's about being motivated to avoid pleasure or avoid pain and move toward pleasure. But whatever language you're using, our behavior leads us toward a reward or away from threat. And that's the organizing principle of our brain. So when we're looking for ways to engage people, to bring out the best in their performance and to motivate them, it helps to understand what as a species can cause us to feel threatened. Yes, it's good to also understand the other side of it, the reward side of it, but for today we're going to focus on the threat aspect. Why is that important? Well, simply put, feeling threatened can essentially shut down our thinking brain, and that just doesn't help performance. So today what we're going to do is we're going to explore the Triune Brain Model, a quick dip into Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs, and then we're going to look at the 5 dimensions of the brain that neuroscience has shown involves the human social experience. So first, what can shut down the brain? Well, many of you are likely already aware of the triune brain theory by Paul MacLean. The model is based on the brain's evolutionary development, and essentially it's about 3 brains within the human brain. To recap quickly, there's the reptilian complex, or the brain stem at the back, and that's primarily concerned with survival, the maintenance of the body. It's responsible for digestion, for reproduction, circulation, breathing, and also the execution of the fight or flight response. So it's all housed in the brain stem. Behaviors are automatic, they're habitual, and they're highly resistant to change. The next section up, the limbic system, that houses the primary centers of emotion. The amygdala is important in the association of events with emotion. The hippocampus is active in converting information into long-term memory and memory recall. And then there's the neocortex. Some know it as the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Whatever that may be, that is your thinking brain. It makes language, speech, and writing possible. The neocortex, well, through it, we think logically, creatively, we can plan for the future, and in most of the time in business, that's the active brain that we want to have working for us. That's what we want to engage. So there's an interesting design feature in the brain. You see, if we're under threat or perceived threat, the resources, well, they essentially shut down our thinking brain. Then that's not ideal. We've known that for a long time, and that's why we do things in meetings or training like to make the environment safe. And I don't mean safe from a saber-toothed tiger, but a comfortable environment. So we do things like we have icebreakers and we have an agenda. We know the start time, we know the end time. We let people know where the washrooms are. That's all to create that safety so that this part of your brain can be quiet while the neocortex, your thinking brain, really gets all the information. So we've known for years that conscious or unconscious threat can mess with performance. And we often referred to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He believed that the physiological and safety needs are the foundation of our motivation, and I can see why. But he also demonstrated that our social needs were a few steps up in the pyramid. But we've learned that that's not entirely the case. The human brain is a social organ, and it's shaped physiologically, neurologically, by social interaction. In other words, from the brain's perspective, social needs are just as important as those basic survival, food, water. So that has a huge impact. Think about it. A researcher named David Rock looked at exhaustive research and in neuroscience, and specifically on the 5 domains of the human social experience to make it easy to remember and to capture the common factors that activate a reward or a threat. He created a mnemonic, and he refers to it as the SCARF model. S stands for status, C for certainty, A for autonomy, R for relatedness, and F for fairness. So we're going to look at them all briefly, and it will be brief. So status is about our relative importance to others. Certainty is about being able to be fairly certain about the future. Autonomy is about having a sense of control, having choice. Relatedness is about safety, figuring out if someone is a friend or a foe. And fairness, well, that's about the perception of fair exchanges between people. Each of these 5 domains can activate the reward or threat response, that circuitry in the brain. And again, the threat response can shut down the neocortex and make us just not quite as smart as we'd like to be. So status. Status is about our importance. If you were presenting a potential solution to a team and the boss said, "That's your solution?" chances are your threat response would be triggered. And just when you need your brain the most, you may not be able to come up with your explanation. Here's another example. For a lot of people, if they hear these words, "Can I give you some feedback?" in the brain, it triggers the same response as hearing footsteps come up behind you at night. Performance. Now, if we're giving somebody performance feedback, even if it's well constructed and well thought out, that can also trigger a threat response. So in that case, the best way to mitigate is to invite the person who's getting the performance feedback to first share their opinion of their performance. Moving on to certainty. So the brain craves certainty. Why? So that it can predict the future, of course. Without that kind of prediction, the brain has to use many more resources, and that's just not efficient. So for efficiency, it needs to be able to predict what's likely to happen. Even a small amount of uncertainty can sort of create an error in the brain, and you know, that flashing error sign. Our brains like to predict the flow of information, so any kind of significant change can generate uncertainty. So to mitigate, establish clear expectations and be clear on the desired outcomes. Let's move on to autonomy. We're almost there. Autonomy is about the perception of having control over your environment and having choices. A reduction in autonomy, for example, if you're being micromanaged, can generate a strong threat response. When one senses a lack of control, the experience isn't a good one, and especially if you feel that you've got an inability to control outcomes. Relatedness is next. Relatedness involves deciding if somebody is a friend or a foe. Remember, much of this happens unconsciously. The decision that someone is a friend or a foe happens quickly, and it impacts the brain functioning profoundly. As an example, and this is an example where performance matters deeply, in an airplane cockpit, if you have a pilot and a co-pilot who have never worked or met each other before, say they're from originally competing companies, they may be from different cultures. That can create a safety risk because it can unconsciously generate a threat response. So just think about it. What could the schedulers in that company do? What could the company do to mitigate that kind of threat response? When people are competitors, their level of empathy drops. So you've probably seen examples where people on competing teams suddenly have a very low level of empathy toward each other. So that's just one of the other fun parts about relatedness. But you know, moving from friend to foe can be helped by the increase of the body's production of oxytocin, just through the experience of a connection, a handshake, or a hug. This also builds trust. And the more people trust one another, the stronger the collaboration will be and the more information is shared. So positive social connections are a primary need. However, the automatic response to a social situation involves a threat. So we do things to mitigate that, like sometimes we have a buddy system or coaching or smaller teams and allowing people to get to know each other. So that's relatedness. On to fairness. If something is perceived as unfair, it generates a strong threat response. Unfair situations, well, you've seen it. They can drive people to die for their cause. Here's the thing. People who perceive injustices, they often don't feel empathy for the people who did the injustice. In some instances, they'll feel rewarded if the people who acted unfairly, in their opinion, are punished. Increased communication, consistency, and transparency in the organization can go a long way to mitigating that kind of a threat response to fairness. So, establishing clear expectations is another way to help ensure that fair exchanges occur. So those are the 5 parts of the SCARF model: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So to wrap up, understanding that people have a physiological response to perceived threats can have a profound effect on the interventions that you bring, your interaction with others, the change initiatives that you have going on in your organizations, and your day-to-day work. It can deeply impact performance, and not just for others, because this model also helps us as individuals recognize some of our own reactions to events, and that level of self-awareness is nothing but good. So that is it for this little presentation. We looked at the triune brain, a little bit about Maslow, and Brock's SCARF model. I hope that you were able to glean some new information, or perhaps it was just a review of something you already know, and I'm glad that you spent the time. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you again. I'm Adrienne White.